Okay, I think we're going to get started. It's 1:01 Calgary time. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Megan Zimmerman. I'm the Director of Business Development at Calgary Economic Development, and I'm also a very proud fellow as part of the Energy Futures Lab, which we'll be talking a lot about today. So welcome to the Energy Futures Lab, Big Ideas for Our Energy Future. This will be an interactive speaker series in which participants are invited to connect virtually with members of our EFL network. By sharing new ideas together, the lab sees a tremendous opportunity to encourage cross-pollination across all stakeholders in the energy system on the topic of how we can create the energy system that the future requires of us while still fueling economic recovery in Alberta and Canada. Participants are encouraged to build connections and explore how various topics might be shaping Canada's collective relationship with the energy landscape. Now, because this event is sponsored by Calgary Economic Development, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we as Calgarians live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda, the Métis Nation, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. If you're not from Calgary, and we know there's several guests on today from Toronto, Edmonton, Texas, and even the UK, we'd welcome you to reflect on a place you call home or a place that you consider special. Now, here's a little bit of background on how we got to today and the big ideas for our Energy Future series. In March, the lab's managing director, Alison Cretney, co-wrote an article with Chad Park titled 5 Big Ideas for Alberta's Economic Recovery. These ideas included hydrogen, geothermal energy, bitumen beyond combustion, artificial intelligence, machine learning, as well as lithium. This article was very well received, and in response, the Energy Futures Lab hosted 2 events featuring fellows with expertise in these fields. Of course, we know there are many big ideas shaping our energy future, which is why the lab has decided to extend this conversation with you until October this year. So thank you to my colleagues at Calgary Economic Development for partnering on this event, as well as Workers in Transition with Liam Hildebrand, who you'll hear from in a future episode, Carbon Capture, Utilization, and Storage with Jason Cardiff, and Inactive Wells with Marla Orenstein. So to kick things off today, I'm happy to introduce to you Mary Moran, the President and CEO of Calgary Economic Development. Mary will answer the question that we're asked a lot lately. Where is Calgary headed? What does our future look like? And what is the roadmap to get us there? Over to you, Mary.
Great. Can everybody hear me? I presume so. Megan, can you hear me?
It's trying to give you a thumbs up. Yep, we can hear you, Mary. You're ready to roll.
Okay, super great. Thanks so much. And thank you so much to the Energy Futures Lab. And thank you to all the participants from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and from everywhere else in the world who are participating. Certainly, there's not a better time to chat about the future of energy, and particularly as we in Alberta assess the twin crisis of COVID and the global oil price war. And I'm here to share with you how we've been thinking about Calgary in the last couple of years as we continue to attempt to find a path forward for our great city and by extension, our province and our country. We really believe that a vision is required, and after assessing many jurisdictions, some of which you probably live in, that have faced a structural change in their key industries, they've had to lean into parallel strategies. And there's a few key themes that emerge: having a clear vision that nurtures the alignment and sparks inspiration in a community, but yet is ambitious and achievable. Obviously, alignment is quite critical, and alignment of industry, post-secondaries, or education and government, but also alignment of all orders of government to ensure that you can continue to evolve as a city and an economy. And then finally, the long-term commitment to change, overcoming adversity, and building on the strengths. So we worked with Boston Consulting Group, had input from over 1,800 Calgarians from all walks of life, and participation and guidance and thought leadership from 40 of the most influential yet thoughtful community and business leaders in our city. And this is a strategy that was built by the community for the community. So I'm just going to ask Emma to advance the slides, because I think you can go to the next one, Emma. And so through this, we created a strategy called Calgary in the New Economy. And while we were looking at the future of our key industries, things that we excelled at, transportation and logistics, agriculture and energy, we also identified opportunities in emerging industries, either that we had talent, competency, or world-class research, or that were underperforming yet big opportunities for us. And we focused on talent, innovation, place, the city that we build, as well as being having a business-friendly environment. And all this while embracing the key distinct values of Calgary, which are inclusivity, entrepreneurialism, and community spirit. And this has really driven us to this vision that Calgary wants to be the city of choice for the best entrepreneurs who can come to Calgary and embrace advanced technologies to solve some of the world's biggest challenges. Safe and secure food, efficient movements of goods and people, better health solutions, and cleaner energy. And certainly there has never been a better time in our history where this is more relevant. COVID just put a spotlight on this, and we know that in moving forward, we need to be bold. And I'll just ask you to advance the slide. So to be successful, we must build on these key strengths that we have. You can advance again. And this is all about our talent. This is about Calgary's workforce. We have the youngest population in the country, with a median age of about 36, almost 37 years old. We have the highest concentration of STEM workers in the country, and have the highest degree completion programs. And we also are the most productive in Canada. We contribute more GDP on a per capita basis than any other jurisdiction in the country. If you can advance the slide. But we're also a community of problem solvers. And I talk about this entrepreneurial spirit in Calgary. And for those of you who haven't visited us, we have an 8-block radius where people do 8 meetings in a day if you're a slacker. But more importantly, we've been innovating for years. And certainly in the energy industry, we figured out how to go 5 kilometers down, 3 kilometers across, and hit a bathtub size target and extract very difficult product out of very difficult geology. And we're getting better and better and trying to improve our performance, both from an environmental, a social, and a governance perspective. But there's other great examples of entrepreneurial companies outside of the energy industry. World-class companies like Benevity, Solium, WestJet, Smart, and companies like Parvis. But there is no question or no denying that we are a community of problem solvers. And to the next slide, Emma. But we also have the highest concentration of headquarters. And so why is that relevant? Because those headquarters are the owners of data. And we happen to have one of the most robust data sets in energy and in healthcare in the country by a long shot. And so, and in some comparisons, even in the world, we have the most robust data. And so this is really critical, because in those head offices are the decision makers, and tech people like to be close to those decision makers. So we know that we are partway there of achieving this vision of becoming the destination of choice to solve these problems by embracing advanced technologies. Just moving to the next slide. And so if you look at the global trends of 25 billion connected devices by 2025, having a $14 trillion injection of global domestic product or GDP, and the impact on the industries that we excel at, energy, agriculture, transportation, and increasingly so life sciences. And that application of that digital technology on those will make us more productive, more predictive, and cleaner in our production as well. And so we went and validated our hypothesis and did research last year, which indicated that in Alberta, there's going to be $18.5 billion invested in digital technologies and energy being one of those key sectors to achieve that goal of being more productive, more predictive, and also more environmentally friendly. And that actually represents a significant portion of the digital spend all across Canada. It's about 40%. And this is by the end of the year 2021. So, obviously, I think what's happening now is COVID is accelerating that. And that's partly due to this global oil price war, which is putting downward pressure on the price of energy and causing us to invest or try to get cost out, both from a resource perspective, but also so we can get better and better and produce cleaner and cleaner energy. So moving to the next slide, the time has come for us to stand up and be bold about our role, particularly in global climate action. And in fact, Calgary and Alberta are blessed with fossil fuels, but we also have an abundance of wind and solar, and are getting better at things like geothermal, hydrogen, as well as energy efficiency, and also are really on a goal to get to zero or low carbon fossil fuel production. And so there's a commitment by this community to develop new sources of energy, better methods, and organizations like the Clean Resource Innovation Network, COSIA, the Energy Futures Lab, and even Transition Energy are all working towards these solutions. We have solutions for the world here in Alberta. And more importantly, we have solution-oriented, smart, young people that are socially conscious and want to achieve these goals. Moving to the next slide, that's it can certainly say from Calgary Economic Development's perspective, we're well aware of the fact these are really tough times for many people, companies in our city and in our province and frankly in our country, but we are also confident that our best days are still ahead of us. At a time when we face generational changes from the structural change in our economy, we still have more opportunities than most cities would ever dream of. After all, we're the 5th most livable city in the world and the 1st most livable city in the Western Hemisphere. But with a clear vision and a commitment to collaboration, we can be the city of choice for the world's best entrepreneurs to come here, embrace technologies, and solve some of the world's biggest challenge. We still have every opportunity to make a difference on the world stage. So I encourage all of you to download Calgary in the New Economy, and certainly feel free to reach out to me directly to discuss the opportunities here in Calgary and Alberta. So with that, Megan, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mary. What a great setup for our esteemed panel. So we heard Mary talk a lot about young, smart, productive, active entrepreneurs. So I'm happy to introduce these people to you, team. A couple of my Energy Futures Lab fellows. So Pregeet Nibber is the co-founder of Reebok Power. You'll hear more from Pregeet and what they're doing there. Gary Millard is the Senior Advisor, Energy and Climate Change with Suncor, a well-known name in this country. And Graham Harrison is stepping in for our Energy Futures Lab colleague, Devin Beaton. Graham is the founder and CEO of Untitled Power. So we're going to get into the Q&A section. We have some questions lined up, of course, for this young, active, smart panel, but we encourage all of our participants to use the Q&A function as well. You'll see you can put your questions in that box, and then you can upvote questions that have already been asked, and that's how we'll determine the questions we'll bring in to the conversation. So we want to hear from you. So to get started, I think I'll start with you, Pregeet. You and I go back a few years, and you're doing some pretty cool stuff. I'd like you to speak a little bit about how Reebok Power is really building on the strengths that already exist in Alberta for your company and your vision with Reebok Power to come to life. And maybe as you're answering that question, just let people know exactly what you are doing so that they have that context.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me part of the event today. So Reebok Power, we are a software platform that allows companies and municipalities to track and monitor their emission reductions and to manage their renewable fleets. And we leveraged the community in Calgary to help build out our pilots. So when we were looking for that cross-section of being interested in using technology in a new way, as well as parties that really wanted to solve a problem. We were able to find them here in Calgary. Actually, through the Energy Futures Lab, we met our first partner, and actually get going. Take a conversation that was happening. Lots of people are talking about how do you use blockchain in a actual application, and we were able to get a group together and kick things off pretty early on in our process. The other thing is we have a great team, and our team is based here. So we were able to access really smart people who are able to move us forward in the technology, to move us forward in the industry, to really sharpen our thinking. And so I would say those are the two main benefits that we've received.
Great. Graham, as a CEO and founder of another small energy technology company in Calgary, I'd be interested in your perspective as well on that question. You know, you heard Mary talk about building on our strengths, and certainly diversification is as important within energy as it is in other sectors. So could you talk a little bit about building on the strengths of what Alberta is already quite good at, and the people you've brought on to the team to build the vision for Nutanna Power?
Yeah, you bet. And thanks very much, Megan, to both CED and the EFL for putting this on today. You know, from our perspective, I think these are great conversations to be having, and right now is a very critical time to be having them. Nutanna Power is an energy storage technology company based here in Calgary. We create and deliver products and services that help companies all throughout the electricity value network adapt to the grid transformation that's currently happening. And deliver ultimately lower cost power for end users. From my perspective, the great thing about Calgary is that, you know, it's the Silicon Valley of pipes and pumps. One of our critical technological developments that we've been working on uses small scale pumped hydro, and having all of these people who are very familiar with moving fluids, with, you know, creating ponds to trap water and move it around for various different purposes. That engineering talent that we've seen here and that we've had develop our team has just been world class. And I think that from my perspective, you know, that extends to sort of all elements of our team. As we've brought it together over time, we've seen that Calgary is really the best place in the world to be doing what we're doing, because we have, you know, the STEM brains here that are fundamental to what we need, and they're very accessible, they're very entrepreneurial, and they're interested in doing new things. You know, some people think about Calgary as an oil and gas city. We see it not as so much just an oil and gas city, so much as it's about an engineering city. You know, this is a city of innovative engineers and innovative thinkers around how do we create systems that deliver value. And so I think it's just been so refreshing to have those conversations with people and build our team here.
That's great. And I think a nice transition might be to go to Gary. Different shoes, Gary, working with Suncor, but could you address a little bit what the role of traditional energy companies like the one you work for in supporting the growth of these types of energy technology companies we just heard from with Pragit and Graham, and really in nurturing that innovation ecosystem, because this is certainly a team sport. So would love your perspective from Suncor in terms of how you guys play.
There we go. Double click there. Yeah, thank you, Megan. So Suncor's role is very different from that of a startup. Startups can find new niches that are opening up and growing, and grow with those. As a large established company, for the sake of our shareholders, our employees, and you know, the community more broadly, you have to maintain some stability in income and revenue and in the business that you operate. And so the challenge for Suncor is to find the right pace of transition. You know, people definitely agree that things are changing. The question is how quickly, and how quickly do you abandon the old in favor of the new, or how quickly do you keep, or how long do you keep what you've got? And that's really where a lot of the new startup or the new innovation companies and groups come in, is that as we look at the future opportunities, we are a business that has been very successful in traditional oil extraction. We've got optimized systems for that, and we would benefit from the insights and the innovation and expertise that come in terms not only of other energies, but even ways to optimize our current systems. So as I discussed, we're not going to turn off the taps on our current base business because there's still a huge demand for energy globally and for oil and gas. And as quickly as we're trying to change all of that, a massive global energy system can't shut off its energy to the citizens. So we have to continue to supply that. We just have to do that as responsibly as possible. And that's where things like improved data management come in. Some of the physical hardware engineering that Graham mentioned, novel techniques and processes, solvent extractions, those sorts of things. Really, those are the opportunities that we've got to not only transition into the new energy system, but help our base business, our traditional energy, keep up with the changes in the expectations of environmental performance, climate change, that sort of thing. And as an organization with a lot of inertia, a lot of experience, we need those insights from outside often to help implement and move forward.
Mm-hmm. Gary, there is a question, and if you want to address this one directly or an example, but when you talk about some of those partnerships with some of those outside entrepreneurs and problem solvers, as Mary said, and that we're trying to attract to this province, one of the questions is around the Enhanced Energy and Quest project. So it looks like a focus on carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Is there an example in there you could draw out to bring what you just said to life and answer one of these questions?
Yeah, what's highlighted there is really the challenge between innovative technology and commercial demand. And one of the challenges we've seen in the climate change space is that there's really amazing technologies coming out, such as carbon capture and sequestration. So we've seen that in the Quest project. We've got the Alberta carbon trunk line. The challenge is that there's no immediate revenue stream from capturing carbon immediately. And that revenue opportunity, the commercial benefit from that, comes from carbon pricing. And the reason that we saw so much global pursuit of carbon capture technology is the anticipation of this carbon pricing around the world. We're starting to see that the price of carbon capture and sequestration is coming down. Carbon price from a regulated perspective is coming up, and the two are beginning to converge, creating that economic opportunity. Until there is that commercial reason to put the investment into that new technology, it's hard to make a case for that. The Quest project had a special one-off economic rationale for that. There were some benefits from the government, but now we need to see policies develop that create the commercial value for implementing those more broadly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that healthy tension that exists, right, that we can't ignore. I think that's a really good transition back to Mary around how do we best, so we talked about your role as a major energy company and some of the smaller players like we're talking to here today. Mary, what do you think is what do we need to support these emerging or transitioning industries? We know there's some gaps in the province and areas that are of high priority to make sure this ecosystem runs well. Could you address that a little bit for us in terms of the work we're doing at Calgary Economic Development and with a lot of other partners as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, there are a couple of things, and we can't underestimate the power of having governments aligned. And I think it's no news to anybody on this phone or on this Zoom call or whatever I'm on today. I can't remember what technology I'm on, but is that we haven't had the governments aligned, focused on the right thing. And so, from our perspective, from the way that we look at Calgary, one is we have a heck of a lot of office space to fill, but more importantly, we have a lot of underutilized people in this city that are highly skilled, highly educated, come from global perspectives, are young, and still are in the most productive period of their careers. And so, we're highly motivated to try to get people back to work. And so you can't make quantum leaps and do a U-turn and all of a sudden become something that you're not, right? So building on the strength is really important. And so, I'm a big believer we need to optimize oil and gas industry as best we can and as environmentally responsibly as we possibly can, but we need to look for other opportunities. And so, you know, getting the governments aligned is really important. And those advanced technologies that everybody's referring to, so whether it be AI, robotics, autonomous systems, AR, VR, all have a big application across all of our industries, but in particular, energy industry. And so, you know, I love to use the comparison. If we had the federal government understand the energy industry like the provincial government does, and the provincial government understand technology and innovation like the federal government, we'd probably have a path out of here. And I mean that in the most complementary way, because I think they both come with different strengths. And so, but we have to get governments aligned. Every other jurisdiction that is built out of economic downturn to become stronger and or to evolve their economy, be more diversified, provide greater job opportunities, have done it with great alignment of governments. And so we need that still. And I would just say, and local companies, big companies, we need to make sure that they know where to go find the people locally here, because growing the companies here at home is quite important. So, you know, you know, when I see the startups that are trying to solve problems in the industry, but they get more traction in jurisdictions like Houston or Denver, but not here at home, you know, I think we have a bit of a responsibility to ensure that we're supporting growth of small companies, because the big job creators in Calgary are not going to be the mega job creators. It's not going to come from the big energy companies anymore. It's going to come from different places. And so we need to help the people that are focused on technologies in our key sectors grow here by utilizing the products, services, and systems that they have, right? So.
A question, that's great, Marion. A question's come up that I know is very close to your heart. I might either Prageet or Graham, if one of you want to answer it, and we'll come back to Mary, because I know this is a hot issue we discussed. But the question is, how might the voice of our strengths become the most prevalent and trusted story that gets into the rest of Canada and the world? So, you know, definitely we know that what we're talking about here, you know, there's tensions in the rest of Canada. And so we're trying to obviously build a lot of bridges and collaborative stories amongst the rest of our Canadian counterparts. Prageet or Graham, do either of you have kind of thoughts on that around, you know, building on the strengths with the stories we have and trying to build trust and stronger relationships with our neighbors around the country?
Sure, I can go first on this one, and then Prageet, you know, feel free to contribute as well. From my perspective, I think that the most important thing we can do right now to sort of reach an alignment and a shared sort of vision of a Canadian future, not just with Alberta and the federal government, but with Alberta, its neighboring provinces, and the other parts of the country, is to, you know, demonstrate that we are, you know, doing what we say we're going to do, and to deliver on this promise of, we have these great resources here, we have all of these smart people here, we have capital that we've accumulated through the oil and gas expansion over the last, you know, 70 years. Let's use that, and let's start doing things now that are evidence that we are, you know, moving forward and transitioning our economy. Something that I often bring up is, you know, if New York City in the 1870s had said, well, you know, exports are declining, the Gulf of Mexico is becoming more important, we're no longer an important port city, let's just get really mad about that but not do anything. What would have happened to New York had that, you know, attitude taken shape and held there? I don't think that it's right to say we shouldn't voice our concerns, but I think that we have to start making change here in order for us to really align with the rest of the country and show that we're doing what we say we're going to do.
Prageet or Gary, either of you have thoughts to add?
I think that was great, Graham. And I mean, to add to that, it is, you know, there's a concept of think local, act global, and our technology should be solving local problems and then be applicable anywhere else that you take them. And I think one of the best indicators of you built something is getting that traction in your home region. And if you're able to build it here, you can take it anywhere. And there is I completely agree about having some consistency and conversation right now across provinces, across borders, and then of course between the provincial and the federal government. I think those are really, really important to have a very thriving, a thriving innovation sector. And we work a lot with different universities across the country. And I think that's, these are hubs of really great talent. And whether you're working in Toronto or you're working here, COVID has highlighted that we can have conversations irrespective of where you are. And we're going to continue to be part of those conversations. Like, we, as a small company, can be part of much larger conversations, partly because we're able to be part and have been invited into a network through the Energy Futures Lab, through the work that CED does.
Yeah, and I'll just support both those statements and go back to the original question. I absolutely agree that there's tremendous potential, there's great ideas and wonderful intent in a lot of Alberta and Canadian industries. But really, going back to Graham's point, it's not enough to want to be really good, you've got to deliver the results. And the doing is really important. Pradeep mentioned, building, connecting, actually delivering on that performance. And it'll be much easier to tell the story when we have tangible results, not just an intent. And so I think we need to worry less about the story we tell and more about what we have to tell a story about.
Mary, I know you have something to contribute, and we do have a question here that is related to this, which is what's holding us back in achieving this vision. So Mary, would love your insight.
Yeah, I mean, I've been sitting here very patiently, and thank you for letting me do the follow-up and letting everybody else speak on this, because I am very passionate about this. And I think there's everybody in particular to Calgary, but I think anywhere around the world that's dealing in oil and gas in particular, or all forms of energy, is our Achilles heel in all of it is that we have a lot of societal pressures that have been building more and more momentum, but we keep talking to them like they're investors or shareholders or government people. And we haven't humanized the energy industry for people. And, we tend to talk about the product, the process, or the pipeline. And that doesn't resonate with, Sheila, the hairdresser in Welland, Ontario, who is participating, and or the youth that are participating in global climate action days and various other things. And so, unfortunately, when you have such a strong STEM population, the last thing they're really good at is marketing and communications. And so we've shifted into consumer marketing, but we're still talking to people like they're, as they say, investors, politicians, shareholders of sorts. So I actually do believe we need to humanize energy for people, because there's nothing in pop culture that has humanized it for anybody except for maybe the Beverly Hillbillies or Dallas, the movie Dallas or show Dallas. But people use energy, and we need all forms of energy. And along those lines, like, I think we have to put a stake in the ground as Calgarians, Albertans, Canadians, and say, we're going to be the best in the world at it, and here are the things we're going to do. But I really believe in Gary's point about, we have to be able to stand up and prove that we did that. And so, there's a lot of migration. I think the proof point is that we're really good at it. But let's just talk about what we're going to do, which is we're going to solve global climate problems, right? And I do believe that we can, because we have the ability to do that, and we're better than most jurisdictions, particularly oil and gas producing jurisdictions in the world. But we do have to have the proof points. And there's a great movement to ESGs as a measurement of our success or our progress that we're making. And I'm really comfortable that people are standing up and saying, in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, we're better at ESGs, environmental, social, and governance criteria. But we need to go one step further. And I'm a big believer and did a weekend research project to see how many people's compensation is actually tied to ESGs. And I can tell you there's very few in the world. And so if we're going to walk the talk, then let's walk the talk, right? And so let's make sure that we can stand up and say that we're good at environmental, social, and governance criteria, but let's also make sure that compensation is tied to that. But before we do that, we've got to convince people that we're actually solving a problem or providing a benefit. And standing up and talking about pipelines, processes, and product is not the way to do it, because I see numerous videos going out about how good we're at SAGD, and I bet you if you walk down to Main Street, Calgary, and asked 8 people, 6 of them or 7 of them wouldn't even know what SAGD is. So stop with the 2-minute videos of, that doesn't create the persona or the message or the purpose of what we're really in the business to do, which is solve problems for the world. Sorry about that, Gary.
I want to see if anyone else on the panel wants to respond to that. I think it's a very compelling point, Mary, and one that maybe there's thoughts you want to build. Gary, you lit up.
So I completely agree that we do need to take action. And there's this concept that if we can't solve it all, we shouldn't bother putting our hat in the ring. And I think Prageet mentioned it, that if we can fix the problem locally, people will look at us and say, hey, we've got the same issue, you solved it, can we get your help? And you've got this exportable technology and workforce. So we don't have to take on all the challenges of the world. If we can just solve a local problem immediately here, that's a value that we can leverage.
There's a question that's kind of related to this around responsibility. So does anyone want to address the question around where does the responsibility lie? We've talked about that vision of attracting the world's best entrepreneurs to solve these biggest challenges, including energy. Where does the responsibility lie? Is there a group or who are the kind of the key players, I guess, in that? And I think, we've addressed some of them today, talking about the role of Suncor and the role of entrepreneurs like Prageet and Graham. But for me, there's, there's a broader story here around, I hate to say be part of the energy, but very, very aligned with, our invitation to come into Alberta and work with us.
Yeah, but I think, frankly, the evolution of this is that that companies and leaders of companies are going to have to take responsibility. That's why I'm a big believer that ESG should be tied to compensation in some way, shape, or form, but increasingly so, investors are going to demand it, right? And so, and if you think about the way investment's going to happen, or is starting to happen, it's being predicted by algorithms, right? It's not being predicted by sitting in front of a bunch of investors and doing a pitch anymore. So you won't be able to escape the accountability part of it. And so, I think companies and leaders in companies, and we see that Suncor is a great example of, stepping in and making claims and about what they want to do to get to a cleaner fossil fuel, but also explore other options or other energy options, because we know we need the mix of all of them, right? And so, I think it's going to be demanded, and it's probably private sector is going to lead and government's likely to follow. You would think it would be the opposite, but I don't know if that's going to happen in Canada in the short term for sure. Mm-hmm. It's a bit of both responsibility, though, to answer the question quite bluntly, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I can jump in here too. The way the question was asked pointed towards, I think it implied looking at attracting employees, individuals, and the responsibility for that is the company. Quite frankly, if you're looking for a job, you are looking for a company that you want to work for, that has that potential, that aligns with what you want to accomplish as an individual. But to look more broadly at the bigger system, and to draw upon even the key pillars of the Calgary and the New Economy plan that Mary shared, as somebody looking for a job in anywhere in the world, you're looking for a good company to work for, and that company doesn't have to do what the rest of the industry is doing. Right? It can be an employer that attracts people independent of the other companies around them. You want a city that's livable, right? This is a global market. People can work almost anywhere. Why would they choose Calgary as a location? independent of all the business considerations, is it a nice place to raise a family? Is it a nice place, when you're not at work, to pursue recreation in the evenings and on the weekends? So you need to make sure that we attract people as humans as well as employees. And then, why would the business choose to operate there? So we're a great example, right? Suncor for me is an example of a company that attracted me to it, and it is headquartered in Calgary. That's great. WestJet is another one. Benevity, Solium, all of these things. Why did they choose this location? That now is the responsibility of the governments, various levels of governments, to have policies, regulations in place that allow companies to be successful and pursue what they want in a free market approach, while contributing to social and environmental benefits. So it is a multi-level responsibility, but you have to look at to whom that you are responsible. And that is a very more direct relationship.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Mary, there is a question. I just want to build on that with Gary. We're talking a lot about talent, and obviously solutions can't be built without the people. The question is around, what is our strategy around our adoption strategy for retaining and attracting high qualified people, and obviously wanting to avoid brain drain and people feeling like they have to leave Alberta to take on the different problems they're looking to solve. So can you speak a little bit to some of the initiatives or work underway to support the transitioning of talent in addition to the attraction of talent?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you this is a very widely held feeling in our organization is that we need to take care of the people who have decided to make Calgary their home already and have been displaced potentially out of the energy industry. And so, our commitment first is to ensure that we can, and that's why I would just say that's why we're looking for other opportunities outside of just, being employed by the energy industry specifically, that there's other opportunities around technology, et cetera. So, there's a couple of things, and I think some companies are doing it quite well with respect to helping some of the people transition within the organization, focus on digital adoption or digital technology adoption across the energy industry, and making a commitment to that digital investment, which will provide job opportunities for their existing employees. But many have been displaced, and I don't disagree. Like, there are a lot of highly educated, very talented, young, want to make Calgary their home, don't want to leave because their family's integrated. That's the stuff that keeps me up at night. And so, we ran a program this year called Edge Up, which is the world's worst acronym, but the world's best program, which is called Energy to Digital Growth, Employment and Upskilling. And we're running a pilot where it's fully paid for. We're running the second cohort right now, which is for 100 people to transition into digital technologies, whether it be project management, whether it actually be software engineering, or whether it be coding and programming. And that program, we need to, I would love to see the federal and provincial government support I want to put thousands of people through that program, because we still have, depending on the time of year, but 2,000 tech jobs open in this city right now. And we had 27% growth in technology in 2019. And it was continuing to grow in 2020, the early part of 2020 pre-COVID. And so, the number one objective for us is transitioning people. And if we can help with that transition, we want to. That program is perfect. It's not just what the energy industry is going to face. It is what every industry is going to face as digital technologies are adopted, and people are going to have to continually learn through their career. So I'm a big believer in that program. I'd love to see more federal and provincial support for it, so we could help many people transition, not just the 100 people out of the 1,000 people that applied to get into that program. So, but there are other programs. There's obviously the university, the digital tech school that SAID is working on and putting in downtown Calgary is going to be focused on transition and continuous learning. We're working with all the post-secondaries to do more work integrated learning. So number one for us is talent transition of the really smart people that live in Calgary. Number two is for us to retain everybody coming out of the post-secondary as we possibly can, because we've seen an exodus out of the 19 to 29-year-old cohort because they're looking for opportunities in other places. And then the third is we have to attract some people because we just can't fill some of those jobs, right? So. Hopefully that.
great. Oh, that's helpful. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I kind of have two thoughts on questions, but Graham and Preggy, I'd like to come back to you. Can you talk a little bit about Alberta's competitive advantage? You know, we've talked about some of the big ones, the talent, the STEM, the concentration of industry. What are your experiences building these world-class technologies and companies here? What should people know that they probably don't? Chance to talk to friends in other parts of the country and around the world from the experience of running a technology company here. Graham, you're lit up. Go ahead.
I'm ready to go. I'm ready to
Okay,
go. I thought
we're ready for you.
me this time, but I'll go again. From our perspective, one of the great competitive advantages of Alberta for Nutana has been that we have a regulatory structure in place around the electricity market generally that some people look at and they say that's very old-fashioned. It's right out of deregulation. It's a free market. It's energy only. It doesn't have a capacity market. Doesn't have all of these bolt-on features that we've seen in other jurisdictions. That to us has been a huge advantage because it allows a lot of freedom to innovate. There isn't a preconceived structure of how the value network has to work or how the value chain has to be structured such that innovators can come in and can say, this is a relatively blank slate for us to interact with. There aren't a ton of regulations around sort of how you have to do things as compared to other places. You're free to earn value in whatever way you want, so long as you're selling energy into the system. And so from our perspective, I think one of the great competitive advantages of Alberta that, enables innovation in the energy storage space has been the fact that, the market here for electricity is relatively abstract in terms of its, prescription of roles beyond the traditional ones contemplated under deregulation.
Yeah, that's great. A lot of room for, diverse market players, right? That have a project or a company they want to bring to life in Alberta. Pragit, I know you've benefited from similar regulatory. Do you want to speak to that from Reebok's perspective?
Yeah, definitely from having a, working and operating in a deregulated market, you get to be a bit more creative, and different parties can be, you can bring different types of economic structures, or if you want to try a different economic model, it's actually easy to try it out. The other thing is that we do have a lot of data, and Mary mentioned this at the beginning. We have an excellent source of information and data, and people that are willing to collaborate and share around that. And that really allows us to get very specific on what, the findings and the opportunities, we're able to uncover them in a way that which could be difficult in other jurisdictions where you don't have that level of data freedom. The other thing is that we're building solutions. Like, I think the environment in Alberta is very, very geared towards finding solutions. And so because we're working towards finding solutions, you have lots of people in STEM that aren't just building tech for tech's sake. They're building tech to solve actual problems, and we have an environment that can enable that, and with the proper regulatory incentives. And I think that is very important, especially if you've got an earlier company that has a longer cycle to market. It's important to have some of those incentive programs in place. So a really great place to pilot, to test out, and then to also then be able to export and then commercialize as well.
I'd just like to, I'd like to build on that because you made a really great point around sort of the ability to pilot and try new things here. One of the great things about Alberta and one of its great competitive advantages that we've seen, having dealt with people, all across the country and in the US now, is that there's a lot of really foundational strength here around delivering technology products. It's not just technology for technology's sake, to your point. It's about having these enabling industries that, can help deliver technological solutions things like ACAMP out of Edmonton, Alta ML out of Edmonton. These are organizations that are not, trying to sell a consumer-facing product. What they're selling is sort of a broad base of foundational expertise to help develop new solutions for industry. And so that type of having that expertise and having that capability here is really something that we've found to be a competitive advantage. I think you hit the nail on the head, Prageet.
That's great. Thanks, team. I'd like to shift back to Mary, and Gary, you might have a perspective from Suncor as well. There's a question around the provincial government's new economic recovery strategy that's been recently announced. Mary, could you talk about that in relation to Calgary's shift to the new economy?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I think, the overall approach is, with the reduction of corporate tax rates is a model that's been used in areas who have had to evolve their economies. Ireland and Israel are probably the best examples of that. I would just say what we've also learned from other jurisdictions is that there's kind of three things that you have to be really good at, which is low taxes, talent, and tolerance. And so, I think Alberta is actually pretty good at all those things, and certainly having the most competitive tax rate. Like if there is a clean tech company that isn't in Alberta right now, they should really seriously consider moving to Alberta. I think that's the theory with respect to that, and has been proven out very successful in other jurisdictions. And we know from research that we do with business leaders across the country and around the world that the number one and number two influencers of relocating to a jurisdiction or setting up a secondary office or a Canadian headquarters is taxes and talent. So I think we have both of those things now. There's no arguing that. In fact, some of the tax gap now is quite big, but it can't just be that. I think as you're restructuring a economy, as well as running a parallel strategy with optimizing the energy industry and trying to create other things, grow small businesses, startups, and scaling companies, that there's other things that you need. And certainly their conversation around innovation and technology is, and the fact they've talked to all the right people in the community is a quantum leap forward with respect, and parallels Calgary and the new economy. And so I'm quite encouraged by the announcements. It's not a one and done kind of thing. I think they're going to have to continue to evolve, but our sectors align, our focus on innovation and technology aligns, our commitment to the energy industry aligns. So I'm encouraged, and I think they've made a lot of steps forward, particularly the Economic Resilience Council that was built, provided great input into that, and we're listening to a lot of people. So I'll leave it at that and pass it over to Gary if he has.
Yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot, Gary, but if there's a perspective from Suncor being such a significant player in our ecosystem and employer that you want to add to Mary's comments.
Yeah, and I'll answer this more, I guess, as an EFL fellow as anything here, but certainly I think the title of it, right, Economic Recovery Plan, is a big indicator. We're going through a certain period of crisis, and we need to recover from this. And what's been put forward, much as Mary pointed out, is very relevant for that recovery phase, making sure that we can return some profitability to organizations, make it attractive in the short term to come here. That takes care of the shorter term view of it. But I look at long-term business development through the lens of, I'm both a geologist and an ecologist. And when you look at the timeframes of either of those, it transcends certainly most of the business planning cycles. And so what I see is the economic recovery strategy is addressed at reaping benefits from short-term operations. And that's what we need to do in the short term. What happens next is we need to begin sowing the seeds of the next phase. And that's what I would like to see some attention paid towards, is how do we create this ecosystem, this culture that attracts people for the next round, the next phase? What seeds are we planting that will bear fruit in the future? Because you look around the world at some of the hotspots like Silicon Valley, like the biotech industry in on the east coast of the U.S., some of the automobile technologies in Europe, and in a lot of cases, they're not necessarily centered there strictly because of taxes or even just educated people. It's this collaborative, innovative culture, right? It's the fact that somebody a couple of doors down in the business community has ideas that you can connect with and build upon. And so are we creating that sense of innovation, that desire to move forward? And I would say that the current strategy focuses on the short-term recovery, which is great. But I would love to see the government plan for the next round of innovation that attracts the growing companies to our communities.
Thanks, Gary. So believe it or not, we're almost at the top of the hour. I don't know where the time went. Kind of feels like an Energy Futures Lab get together. The hours just melt away. But I wanted to end with a question for each of my panelists before we wrap. Try to keep it tight, kind of a tweet length response. The question is, what's the message you'd like to share with an emerging leader elsewhere in Canada or elsewhere in the world that's joining us today? What's the message you'd like to leave them with, or the takeaway, or the ask? Prageet, I'll start with you.
Calgary one is a great place to start a business. If you are an entrepreneur and you're looking for partners, it is a great place to find a lot of people. I think there is a very collaborative culture here. And if you are an entrepreneur looking to accomplish anything, this is definitely longer than a tweet. I apologize. But we have, our collaborative culture allows us to get stuff done.
Gary, what's your message for the rest of our Canadian friends and global friends?
Sure. A healthy and successful business community needs a number of ingredients. We've listed the number of those already: the talent, the capital investment, the favorable regulatory and policy environment, and those exist in Calgary. There are opening niches, to use an ecological term, that create economic opportunities, and the ingredients are there for somebody to turn it into something spectacular. And I would encourage people to take a look at what they could do to adapt to the opening niches using all of the assets we've got in Calgary.
Thank you. Mary, you're on mute, Mary. It looks like a passionate answer.
No, I'm gonna let.
Oh, Graham. Okay. Graham, over to you.
I will keep mine tweet length. Come to Calgary.
Short and sweet. They extended their character limit. You can say more. It's okay.
Come to Calgary. There's no better place to work in the clean tech world right now than here.
Thank you. Mary.
Oh, you want me to go? Okay. Well, I would just say, I've had the benefit of working and living all over the country and the world. And if you're one of the world's best entrepreneurs and you place value on an inclusive, entrepreneurial, and spirited community, both in business and in the way we live, then definitely come to Calgary and be part of the energy.
Thank you. So with that's we got to get it in when we can, of course. So we're going to just close the session here. I want to just pose a question to the participants left on the line in the chat, and we'd love to hear from you. What actions do you think Calgary can take to better support the transition to a cleaner energy future? You've heard a lot from our panelists. We know there's a lot of esteemed people on the call, and Energy Futures Lab, like we said, we want to hear from others and we want to engage in this conversation. So please share in the chat some of your answer to that question about what we could be doing to support this transition. And in closing, I just want to remind everybody that this is the start of a series. Our next session in Big Ideas for Our Energy Future will take place later this month with Monica Curtis, July 14th, next week. Monica is the CEO of Energy Efficiency Alberta. And to stay up to date with all of the upcoming Energy Futures Lab engagements, webinars, workshops, and of course this series, you can see all the social media channels on your screen. So with that, thank you to my panelists, Gary, Pregeet, Graham, and Mary. Great conversation, interesting perspectives, and really great dialogue. We didn't get to many of the questions, but tried to address as many as we could. And more of this conversation certainly is critical in achieving that shared energy future that we're all very passionate about. So thank you for participating today. 2 o'clock on the nose. Nice job, team. And we'll look forward to the next one with Monica on the 14th.